Welcome to the disaster, guys. I'm Chris, that's Bex, and this is our first ever narrowboat. So currently on our unplanned and complete refit of the boat, we're working on the living room, and that's before we go continuous cruising for the rest of our God-forbidden lives. Will the cruising ever happen? It's gonna happen, alright? But I'm useless at DIY, I'm dreadful, and Bex is pretty animal at it, to be fair. So yeah, get a move on, Bex. Get me cruising, get us cruising.
In the last episode, we started reconstruction on the Stovall area.
In this episode, we're going to continue ripping parts of it out, and we're going to turn it into the safest stove on any river and canal ever. And yeah, guess what? It came with a huge blimmin' hiccup. Why do narrowboats attract so many insects? And today's insect is an insect that I like. It is the insect in the name of the bee. Okay, enough of the nonsense. Every time people are walking past our marina, I keep hearing the word nest muttering in conversations. And today I walked past the bush next to the marina and checked this out. The amount of bees in this bush was unreal, and I love a bee. They don't sting me, I don't sting them. They love me, I love them, innit? Sorted, everyone's happy. You haven't tuned in to hear my expert opinion on bees. In the last episode, my good friend the Maverick came out and helped us uninstall our stove. In this episode, I'm going to try to reinstall it all by myself. The plan is to update the tiles behind the stove and the tiles below the stove. This thing is not safe, guys. Funnily enough, it's not because of the disgusting tiles, but more of that later. It turned out our stove was illegal. So we're going to try and pull off these tiles, so I think they're just going to fall off pretty easy, to be honest.
These tiles are like just dangling on, basically. For anybody thinking about redoing their stove back-ins, like, I don't think you're meant to use normal adhesive because it just can't cope with it, and this happens. I mean, half of ours had fallen off on their own. Can we just take a moment of appreciation at just how wonderful the previous tiler was at this job? I mean, just look at the straight edge on that. They've taken so much care to cut that tile. But look along this edge, like they obviously didn't have a tile cutter and so have just like broken them by hand or something. Before we go and buy our tiles, because we're trying to work out how many tiles we're going to need for this space. But before we get to that point, we're trying to work out if there's a reason why this wall is angled away from the side, and we think it might be to do with the fact that it's where the bow of the boat starts, the nose starts to bend inwards. So there's not a completely flat edge behind here.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a look. See if that theory is correct. I don't know if it was a design thing or if it's something to do with the air gap you meant to have behind your fireboard.
It turned out it was there to hide something illegal. I mean, stuff keeps coming off week after week. Things are being unattached, taken off, and kept on the vessel, like in weird spots, but not spots where they're meant to be. You've got to wonder, haven't you? Here Crobot go again, starting off another job. We were meant to be installing the hot water in the back room, but in order to install the hot water in the back room, we've got to clear the back room into the living room. So now we've got to finish the fireplace first, get the stove back reinstalled, then do the hard wax flooring, which makes space for all the junk in the back room to move into the living room so that Becca's dad can operate to get us hot water in the calorifier, which is located in the back room. Have you got it? Good God. Struggling.
Chris is coming to do the last two tiles. Gently. It's just got a few screws in it. Just go unscrew.
Bex is struggling a bit, so I said harbour your energy. Let a handsome strong man come in and do it. Give it the old wiggle-rooney.
You're going to hate it down here.
Holy. I've located the nest of the queen. The queen's nest. Oh, look what's behind it. Some of that lovely, lovely weird wall. So get these off so we can start to investigate what became our illegal wall. Cool.
So for anyone who's interested, if you're doing your stove up on a narrowboat, it's really important, one, that you have fireboard behind your stove, and two, behind your fireboard that you have an air gap, so you have some battens like this that create a space between your fireboard and the wood behind, because otherwise it's really quite a dangerous hazard. When we've come to look at ours, I think obviously someone's maybe thought about the air gap thing, but also just to make it more decorative, they've kind of angled it in like this. Whereas what we want to do is keep that wall nice and flat, because then our tiles will sit together much more nicely. You won't have to cut weird shapes of tiles anywhere. They'll just sit at a right angle to each other. So we'll just take these off and replace them with a batten that is straight all the way up the top. Fix our new fireboard, slap on our tiles, happy days.
So our fireplace is really overly legal here, and then as it creeps up more and more and more, higher, 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 it becomes illegal there. We've been operating with an illegal fireplace. Ooh. Crobot is being illegal. There must be so much stuff on narrowboats that is sort of a bit illegal and stuff.
Massively.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So after an allowance of roughly 5 minutes of being allowed to experience what it's like to be a bad boy, illegal person, Bex decided it was a good idea that we try and make our boat less illegal.
We've betrayed our usual trade store, and we've actually come and had a secret liaison with Wix instead of the usual B&Q. And the reason for this is that we need some fireboard to protect the walls and everything that are surrounding the stove. And unfortunately B&Q doesn't do it, but Wix does. So that's all grand. However, it comes in these enormous sheets which won't fit in the car. So we're having to do a nifty bit of DIY in the Wix car park.
Bex loves all this. She does not give a sh**. I'm always a little bit like, oh, what are people going to say? But Bex just goes straight head first in to doing stuff like this. She doesn't care what anyone thinks, as long as she's not causing anyone any harm, you know. I mean, that's the way it should be anyway, isn't it? Do whatever you like in life, as long as you don't piss someone off.
It's quite funny how many like weird looks we're getting from people, like people walking past like wanting to look but not look at the same time.
So get the last bit of this into the car, boot that shut, and make our way back to the hellhole. I mean, she's lovely really, isn't she? It's just all that stupid DIY. And here is the queen of DIY. Behind the scenes, what's really going on? Handbag, juices. So the plan for the half here, is it called the half, is that how you pronounce it? Is to replace these with black and white tiles.
I mean, the very fact that you just lift these off goes to show that they're adhesive well and truly.
So we're going to have to get on ordering them up for the next few weeks. Right, let's get rid of this illegal matter. This is going to lead straight into the bow thrust area, isn't it? So this would actually be the easiest way to get in there if we ever needed to get in. So all that crawling around in there.
We made it much easier on ourselves. So now that we've got our fireboard, we are set to erect it. And as I think I mentioned once before, it's really, really important that you make sure there's an air gap between the fireboard and the wood or whatever is behind it, basically. This is a safety sort of thing. And I think it's actually part of your BSS, but more importantly, it just protects your boat from burning down if anything goes wrong anyway. So in order to do that, all we're going to do is just make some little battens that will screw into the back wall, and then we'll screw our fireboard onto it. So you have your boat wall or your sub wall or whatever you want to call it. Then have your batten in between, screwed on like that. Then you screw your fireboard onto this side. So this is all a gap, but we'll show you that a bit more in detail once it's up. Two more to go. Actually, no, it's like 4, 5 more to go. Do you want to cut one?
Hand it over. Come on, let's give it a go. I didn't want to ruin this because Bex has done all the measurements and then I come in and ruin it all. So, what is it? Why is it going off? Why is he so stupid? Wait!
So here's the old ones that had the slant on them, as you can see. These will be our new ones, so that they basically square up the back wall, which will translate to how the tiles sit together nicely on a flat frame instead of having one wall that's straight and one wall's like that, basically.
Yeah, it was odd, wasn't it, really?
Very odd. Can you see that? Does that make sense?
I think they get the point, yeah.
We're just going to screw these in and then happy days. So for anyone who didn't know what I was on about when I was rabbiting on about battens before and air spaces, this is them.
Batten 1, installed, legal. It's always cooler if you're a bit dangerous, isn't it, in life? Why are we going all safety conscious?
So your fireboard will now mount onto that, so you'll have your little space here, so that if, God forbid, a fire broke out, the fireboard is intended to take a hit for it will burn for like hours and hours before it will reach whatever's underneath it. And that's all I understand about the process.
Well, yeah, firstly, you obviously don't want to burn alive, do you, and die. And secondly, I mean, it just means that our insurance is invalid, really. It means that if the boat were to go up, they'd find out that it hasn't got the right requirements, and it would, yeah, you wouldn't get any money back. So. And
in researching this, like, I've seen so many posts like on different narrowboat groups where someone's like a bit suspicious about the tiles around their fireplace, and they've gone, you know what, I'm going to take them off and just check, and their tiles have literally just been tiled onto wood with no protection there at all. It's one thing sort of being overly safety conscious, but that really is really risky. That could just go up like that.
Funnily enough, water isn't your biggest enemy on a narrowboat, it's fire.
Fire?
I don't really know if it is, but I don't know. It's not a good one, is it? So these are our stilts. So all ready for our special fire safety boards, is that how you call them? And here you can see there's a nice big fat juicy gap behind, and also on the left side, and also on the top side. You thought we weren't going to pass the BSS?
Well, fingers crossed.
So Bex has instructed us to start taking another part of the wall out. Just this one tiny little corner. Get my body in it, get my body in it. It's me doing it, not Becca. So we're going to put the fireboards up here too, and here, and in the middle we're going to have the lovely copper thing. But we weren't sure if we wanted to keep the tongue and groove and maybe put it on top of the fireboard. So we started having a little play about here. We've taken the little corner off, and we've realised that you can't get it out without this panel coming out again. And that's led us to think, well, if we've got to get these out here on this side, you've actually got to take this whole skirting off. Is that skirting? You know what I mean. That off, which leads right down to the other side of the boat. Then you'll have to start unscrewing these and then pulling all them out, and it just seems like this is going to be like, you know, a big ball ache of a job. But Bex has just said, why don't we just put the fireboards over the top of it, and then, you know, we can't use the tongue and groove idea, but the initial idea was anyway just to paint it. So I think, are we going to spend weeks and weeks ripping out this whole wall, or just make it a bit easier on ourselves and go the route that we were initially going to go and just paint it?
Because I suspect actually behind the tongue and groove is just insulation, so regardless of what we did, whether we put up boards that we're going to paint or whether we retain the tongue and groove, we would have to fit some other wood behind there for the fireboard to be situated on. So we're just going to have a sneak peek and see what's going on behind the walls to figure this all out.
Put it on, put it off. We've had this on and off about 10 times, haven't we, so far? Oh, he's doing work!
So as suspected, There is nothing else behind that other than the battens that the tongue groove's screwed into.
Illegal. Actually, it's not illegal if your boat was already designed like that, like years and years and years ago before the rules came into play. But they obviously add new rules into it with all these fire precautions and things. And now if you meddle about with it, you've got to make sure that you put it back correctly, I believe. So time to try and reinstall this stove all by myself. Okay, glove me, Bex.
Gotcha.
Wanna be gloved?
Okie dokie. So now that we've sorted the fireboard for the bottom half of the surround for the stove, we're just going to have to temporarily put the stove back into position to check that we haven't lost too much space on the hearth.
The Maverick is nowhere to be found, so yours truly is going to attempt to put it back in position.
I think Chris quite knows what he's going on about. He's like, yeah, no problem, like, you do realise they're pretty heavy, right? And he's like, no, they're not heavy. I'm like, yeah, they're heavy. They're like cast iron or something, aren't they?
It's that moment that the world is going to see if Chris's Crobot is strong enough to be able to lift this bleeding thing. Turns out Bex wants to lift it now. Look, she's lifted it!
Dusty. Should have put goggles on.
I mean, I thought I was meant to be doing it. You done the most of that, didn't you?
Really?
So getting the stove back in wasn't a problem for Bex, but it opened our eyes to a slightly bigger problem. So the stove walls obviously sit out a bit further, thus creating less space between the fireboard and the stove. And guess what? That space doesn't fit the legal requirement on either side.